Hugh Grant, taking on the tabloids.
Hugh Grant, one of Britain's best-known movie stars, has become embroiled in a bitter conflict.
I think Mr. Grant was obsessed by trying to drag the Daily Mail into another newspaper's scandal.
For Christ's sake, there's a huge problem in this country with the press.
With exclusive access, we go inside his campaign to reform the British press.
There's another piece with their side of the argument. We knew that there would be a lot of shouting via the megaphone of the press. I thought it was already turned up to 11 out of 10, but this turns it up to 30 out of 10. I mean, it's insane. Oh, hello, is this Paul Dacre's office? Hello. Cut off? It's a conspiracy. All right, well, thanks, Laura.
It is the crossing of a Rubicon.
Yes, I think that's Paul's. I've always thought that was Paul's.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
How do you get sunlight if you're regulating yourself? If it's Dacre looking at himself, or Peter Hill reprimanding himself, where's the sunlight?
You can access the voicemails by tapping a number. Now, are you really telling me that journalists aren't going to do that?
We're the David taking on a terrifying Goliath of huge newspaper groups.
After hundreds of years of regulating itself, control of the British press is up for grabs. Following a series of scandals about the behaviour of the newspapers, Lord Leveson's inquiry into press conduct will soon deliver its verdict. The big questions are who will regulate the press and what power they will have. Hugh Grant and the campaign group Hacked Off are arguing for tougher regulation underpinned by statute. Powerful interests are conspiring to persuade the Prime Minister to ignore Leveson if his report takes a similar line.
You're concerned, you're worried about how the Prime Minister is going to respond to whatever Leveson suggests.
That's right. A few weeks ago, we start to get weird rumblings from one of his ministers that saying Leveson's a waste of time. We get these odd articles in the Times saying the government, close sources or reliable sources at number 10 say the government has already decided not even to listen to Leveson before it's published.
No. Is Grant paranoid, or is he right? A year ago, the Prime Minister said that if Leveson's recommendations on how to clean up the press were reasonable, he would enact them. But now Grant fears that the PM may be backsliding.
We're off to see the Prime Minister. We want him to get him to repeat, really, what he said to me last year, which was, if it's not bonkers, I'll do it. And then we can say that at our press conference, and that'll free up poor old Judge Leveson sitting there writing his report to write whatever he wants to write.
Sit, we're away.
Hi, good to see you. Hello, I remember you, absolutely.
Me again.
Nice to see you. Very good.
Thank you.
Right. So, this is the last of your three conferences. Have you had a good session at each?
We have, rather. You need to keep up the good standard, if you possibly can.
You're getting good at this. Yeah. Good, excellent. Well, look, you've got my time, so I'm in your hands. It'd be good to have a sort of frank conversation about what you think the inquiry taught us all about what will work and what won't.
All political parties prefer their discussions about the press to happen behind closed doors. It began with a set of extraordinary scandals. The phone hacking of a murdered schoolgirl, inappropriate behaviour at Scotland Yard.
The police responded with an investigation into themselves.
I have this afternoon informed the Palace, Home Secretary and the Mayor of my intention to resign as Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Service.
And on it went, into the very heart of Downing Street.
That is why it's right and proper to establish a full public inquiry to get to the bottom of what happened.
I swear by Almighty God.
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 And the evidence I shall give here
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
The Leveson inquiry is the 6th time in the last 65 years that the conduct of the press has been examined. On all previous occasions, the government at the last moment has given the press one more chance to regulate themselves. No one knows what Leveson will say, but in an increasingly bitter debate, Hacked Off is worried that history is about to repeat itself. Their opponents claim any legislation is a threat to the freedom of the press and its ability to break important stories that strike at the heart of government. like the MP's expenses claims.
For all their many imperfections, British papers are the only brakes on the increasingly arrogant behaviour of our ruling classes.
Both sides accuse the other of vested interests, and Grant fears the PM has been got at.
So, Hugh, immediate reaction?
Well, it was a bit troubling, to tell you the honest truth, because the dream reaction is that he would have said, look, if Leveson's not bonkers, I'll do it. Well, he did say that, but then he went on to debate. If Leveson recommended a dab of statute, which we all agree is not bonkers, how exactly does that work? As though, so the implication was, I'm going to procrastinate, I'm going to have more and more committees, and this thing will be pushed down the road and into oblivion, just like all previous public inquiries into the press. So that's a little depressing, but I would want to hear this.
Grant's campaign needs to get support from across the political spectrum. Today, he's trying to win over the Tories at a conference fringe event.
I'm not a lefty, I'm not a righty either, I'm sorry to say, not even a middly, I'm a floaty. And I trust myself on this, that I am not a muzzler. The next question is, am I a whinging, trouser-dropping celeb? And the answer to that really is yes, and no. No, in the sense that a lot of people say, oh, Hugh, it's just because you got caught with a hooker in 1995 and you're curious cross about it. But I'm really not actually about that. I mean, I did a crime, it was a public record, it was always going to be reported, so that's not my motive. But now you see a newspaper industry which has always been, as it should be, irreverent, spiky, nosy, never sycophantic, and I would defend those qualities to the last man. I'd get in that trench with Paul Dacre. It's a terrible thought, but I would do it to defend those aspects of our press. But they were always tempered, in the end, by a basic sense of human decency. And what shocks me is that decency is gone.
Grant's obsession springs from his meetings with ordinary victims of press abuse. People like the Watsons. In 1991, their daughter Diane was murdered by a fellow pupil when she was just 15.
We didn't think we'd lose our daughter. Never occurred to us. She just went to school one morning and that was it. The last time we saw her alive.
4 girls had carried her from the school up the stairways to her flat, and I opened the door. She had denims and a white t-shirt on, and the white t-shirt was lit red because of the blood. So we laid her on the floor. I tried to give her resuscitation. Nothing was happening. Then he died then. Every time I come in and out that front door, I feel like stepping over as if she's still there. You feel as if when Dan's there, I've got to step over her because I can't get out of my head. Her lying on that floor and me trying to help her.
So just, they write things without thinking. They don't check their facts. They've written stuff that simply did not happen, and if it did happen, I'd be the first to condemn Diane.
In the months after the murderer Barbara Glover was convicted, articles in the Glasgow Herald and Marie Claire implied Diane was a bully and a snob, and the Watsons believe implied she was responsible for her own murder.
The gist of it is that she was a bully, looked down on Glover with disdain, thought she was above everyone else. But the fact is, the 2 girls didn't know one another, they had nothing to do with one another.
It was all proved in court. I mean, in court there was 60 or 70 kids as witnesses.
So it was established absolutely by the judge that
yes.
Your daughter was never a bully. And
yes.
You wanted a meeting with the journalist.
Yes.
And you couldn't get one?
No, we thought we'd just arrive at the office and request a meeting, either with Jack McLean or his editor.
Yeah.
And the girl behind the reception desk says, no, you can't just come up here just like that. And we refused to move for a while. And we were taken into a cleaner's room.
There was mops and pails and all.
Did they know who you were?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And they just shoved us in this cupboard.
You couldn't take legal action against paper because there's no defamation of people who are deceased,
no.
right?
And we didn't have the money anyway to pursue things like that.
Nearly 2 years after the murder, neither an apology nor a correction had been published from either the Glasgow Herald or Marie Claire. Diane's younger brother, Alan, became increasingly distressed. He took an overdose and died with the articles in his hands.
He actually left a note, and it said, "Dear Mum and Dad, I'm sorry, but I want to be with Diane."
Years after the murder, the Glasgow Herald and Marie Claire apologised. But for the Watsons, it was too little, too late. They felt they had no proper right of reply.
Do you think that the press should be completely independent of government and no one should ever interfere with the way they do business?
Well, I think the press complaints system, whatever body's set up to replace it, has to be completely independent of the press and the government. They can't wait for this to be buried so they can get on with doing what they already did previous to the Levison inquiry. I'll not stop unless there's a legal underpinning. And it'd be an indictment on this government if they don't take on board what Lord Levison has to recommend.
Everyone agrees what happened to the Watsons was unacceptable. The question is, what to do about it. In the increasingly hostile battle over how the press should be regulated, Grant and his friends are accused of being hypocritical celebrities, happy to use the media to promote their careers, but complaining whenever their dirty linen is washed in public. For Grant, many of those opponents to his view pretend to be champions of freedom of speech, when in reality, their true motives are protecting their own political and commercial interests. So acrimonious has this debate become that very few of the other side want to debate the issues with Grant.
Hugh, thank you very much. Very nice of you to do this. Yeah, brilliant. OK, we've got a horrible room at the end here.
John Whittingdale, the chairman of Parliament's Media Select Committee, has agreed to meet Grant. He believes that government involvement in press regulation will set a bad example to other nations.
I spent last weekend in the Ukraine. I went there to monitor the elections. And I talked to some of my other election observers, people who go around trying to promote properly functioning democracy. And they said, if the UK were to pass a law which said government has a role in regulating the press, then every other country which is itching to start interfering in the press will say, well, there you are. The UK says it's all right. Therefore, that's the green light. We can do it. And I really do think that is a serious danger.
I beg your pardon, John, but to be proposing that independent regulation with statutory underpinning is, in any sense, close to the Ukraine.
It's not the same thing at all. It'll be all right. But what it does, there is a Rubicon, and once you cross it, and that is to concede that government has some role, even if it's only at arm's length, even if it's only statutory underpinning, then that is potentially a road which can lead to a dangerous position where the governments get involved.
But Grant wants to challenge him about his relationship with certain executives at News International.
You were very honest at the VCMS Select Committee, I think at the big day, the Murdoch day. I remember you saying, I need to declare an interest. I'm Facebook friends, I think. With Rebecca Brooks and with Elizabeth Murdoch.
I have a huge number of Facebook friends. The truth is, I think I've only ever met Elizabeth Murdoch once, and I think I've met Rebecca Brooks 4 or 5 times, but it was always in either sort of large gatherings or sort of small dinners. I mean, I would not call her a friend.
Would you call Les Hinton a friend?
Yes, I mean, much more so in that Les is somebody I've known for a very long time and who I have sort of been to dinner with a couple of times, I think.
Les Hinton is the former head of News International.
But on the other hand, I rather suspect Les Hinton wouldn't think that he was a friend of mine now because, of course, I chaired a committee that unanimously concluded that he'd lied to Parliament.
John Whittingdale has always been transparent about his links to the press.
Very emotive what he said about Ukraine and how the rest of Europe would start going the same way.
Yes, I think that's balls. I've always thought that was balls. That's Daily Mail propaganda speak. The spectre of Ukraine or the spectre of North Korea or Zimbabwe. For Christ's sake, there's a huge problem in this country with the press, with abuses carried out on innocent, families of murder victims, and police being bribed, politicians terrified, not doing their job, elected officials, terrified of certain media moguls. That's a gigantic problem, and that needs fixing. Hi. We are going up to the hacked off offices, which we've now had for a couple of weeks and which I've never been to. They're reported to be the most crowded offices in London. This is a bit a sweatshop.
OK, so everybody, the Daily Telegraph this morning.
Hacked Off is a campaign group fronted by an actor, an academic, and a former Liberal MP. It's funded by a number of sources, including Hugh Grant himself. Until now, Hacked Off has been the only campaign group out there. But today, that's all changed. The enemy has shown its face. A new press organisation calling itself the Free Speech Network.
For the first time, the industry has formed itself into a pressure group to oppose us. And in a way, it's a good thing, because it's a recognition that they're scared of us now. And we've seen their literature as they try to summon support for their opening meeting tonight. It talks about us. It says we've got to have a voice to oppose Hacked Off. What they want is, above all, they want to continue self-regulation, which is what they've had for 50 years. They call this state regulation, which is what it's not. But if you call it state regulation, then you can start to talk about Zimbabwe and North Korea and all that stuff.
Grant decides to turn up to their opponent's event.
Good evening. Evening. Free Speech Network?
On the right-hand side.
Thank you very much. We're making this film for Channel 4.
Yeah.
Is it OK if I bring the camera in? Because it's a very interesting subject, free speech. We want to get all sides of it.
I think we'll just have to check that.
Yeah, we chatted to the team earlier. Said we went.
Although they are told they can come in, the camera is denied entry. But the event is filmed by others.
I believe that there is an absolutely fundamental, principled objection. Once the state is involved, that decision would resonate around the world in a way which would be deeply damaging to the cause that I believe in most passionately. It is the crossing of a Rubicon.
I don't know, maybe there are more people making good journalism.
On the steps outside, one of Grant's most powerful opponents, Lord Hunt, appears.
Oh, Lord Hunt, yeah, hello. Yeah.
I was just explaining I'm now able to get in.
Well, I'm not allowed in. This is Laura, by the way. This is Lord Hunt.
How do you do?
Yeah, I can't come in with the camera, which would be very interesting for our programme.
We'll get through. We'll get something at the end of the day, but it's got to be by agreement, I think.
I don't see that. You see, to me, the press are the ones in the dock here. They have had 5 chances in the last chance saloon. I think it's over for them. Now, I'm afraid, it's not an ideal situation. That's why we had a public inquiry. That's why a judge was asked to do this. Because the press cannot be trusted, yet again, to regulate themselves.
Yeah, I think I'm aware of Hugh's views. Don't worry. No need to restate them.
The former England football manager Sven-Göran Eriksson's among 4 people taking action against the publishers of the Daily Mirror over alleged phone hacking.
With 5 weeks to go, the stakes are suddenly raised as another newspaper group is drawn into the scandal.
Well, this is a very significant moment, I think, in the phone hacking story. The first time that another newspaper group, apart from News International, has faced legal action over allegations of phone hacking. Now, what is interesting about Sven-Göran Eriksson's claim in particular is, of course, during that period, Piers Morgan was editor of the Daily Mirror. He has always maintained there was never any phone hacking going on under his watch. He gave evidence along those lines, of course, to Lord Leveson via a video link in December of 2011.
Neil, thank you. The government's controversial Badger cull has been delayed until...
Well, that is, that's a very significant development, because this starts to give more concrete evidence that, of course, that the problem of phone hacking and other abuses was much wider than just the News of the World or even News International. It adds to the great mystery of what Piers Morgan knew or didn't know or didn't do in regard to phone hacking.
Did the rumour mill you're referring to embrace your newspaper as being amongst the perpetrators?
Not that I remember, no.
Oh, come on, Mr. Morgan, your newspaper was near the top of the list, wasn't it?
Top of the list of what?
Of the perpetrators, those who were carrying out this sort of practice. And you well know that.
Well, you also well know that not a single person has made any formal or legal complaint against the Daily Mirror for phone hacking. Not one.
Have you listened to recordings of what you knew to be illegally obtained voicemail messages?
I do not believe so, no.
Well, you either did or you didn't. I don't think it's a question of belief.
No, it is.
Have you listened to recordings of what you knew to be illegally obtained voicemail messages?
I do not believe so.
Do you ever use private detectives or electronic
Grant has been given some footage that has never been seen before.
The other day at breakfast, just before the Tory conference, we were chatting to Charlotte Church, and she suddenly remembered that she had interviewed Piers Morgan for a speech she was making, and it was videoed. And in it, he talked about phone hacking. And so she's lent us the DVD, and this is it.
There was a spate of stories that came out because of mobile phones. When they first came out, mobile phones, journalists found out that if the celebrity hadn't changed their PIN code,
Yeah, you
right,
can access their voicemail.
you can access their voicemail just by tapping a number. Now, are you really telling me that journalists aren't going to do that?
Yeah.
If they know they can ring up Charlotte Church's mobile phone, listen to all her messages, right? Now, all you have to do, and I know it's hard because celebrities don't like doing anything for themselves, is actually change your security number.
I've changed my security number.
And now you don't have to worry.
Exactly.
Piers Morgan has always said he knew phone hacking existed, but maintains he never knowingly used it. The Daily Mirror maintains that all its journalists work within the criminal law and the PCC Code of Conduct. Grant's passion for this subject intensified after a chance encounter with a tabloid journalist 2 years ago. What Paul McMullen told him shocked him so much, he's been campaigning for tougher regulation of the press ever since. Today, he returns to visit the ex-reporter in his pub in Dover to dig deeper into what McMullen got up to.
Right, yeah, there have been two stories that I regret went too far on, and one I think was Denham Elliott's daughter, Denham Elliott, big star, trading places in that film, and he took his daughter up the red carpet, so she had a bit of celebrity status as well, and she was very pretty blonde. But so we got the phone call that she's now a junkie and she's begging outside Chalk Farm Tube, I think, and so I looked for her. This is after he's died? I think it's just after he's died. Yeah, basically her life fell apart. It took me 2 weeks to find her, actually. It was quite I don't think I recognised her. It was dreadlocks, smelly, dirty. And I gave her £1 and I thought, oh, got you, at last. And she was sitting on the floor begging. And where I went too far, I said, I'll give you 50 quid for sex. And she went, will you? Oh, I don't really do that. But and then we had a conversation about it, and then eventually said, all right. So I thought, oh, great. So I've got her begging, she's a junkie, and she's a prostitute. Brilliant. I mean, I did a total number on this girl who was very vulnerable and actually began to see me as a friend. And I thought, you won't think that on Sunday, love. Well, I mean, she did commit suicide later, but not immediately after that. So I'd have to say, meeting a News of the World reporter, i.e. me, wasn't the best thing that ever happened to her.
Not only is McMullen prepared to confess to what he did, he's also keen to defend the freedom of the tabloids.
We don't agree on definitions of public interest, because to you, public interest and interesting to the public is the same thing, right? Yes. I think the public are clever enough to decide what they want to read and whether or not they want to put their hand in the pocket and pay £1 for that. And if they're interested in it, therefore it must be, by definition, in the public interest. Yeah.
There are 3 weeks left until publication of Lord Leveson's report, and before anyone even knows what he's written, the battle between Hugh Grant and the opponents of the inquiry is escalating.
Laura, I can offer you China's everyday green tea or some disgusting black tea.
Black tea, please.
Yeah, a scary piece in the Daily Mail today. MP's attack on Channel 4 over Hugh Grant's Leveson documentary, and it says that an MP last night accused Channel 4 of commissioning a loaded documentary on the Leveson inquiry into press standards that will be presented by Hugh Grant. Alan Cairns has written to its chief executive, David Abraham, asking how a programme fronted by the actor will ever comply with Ofcom's rules about impartiality. The thing is, we've tried. I want to be as impartial as possible. I think it makes a stronger case if you hear lots of the other side. Plus, it's the rules. We have to, and they're good rules, in my opinion. Our problem has been we can't get people from the other side to talk to us. You know, in terms of politicians, we've had refusals from Michael Gove, from Boris Johnson, from Eric Pickles, from editors, Paul Dacre, no, Piers Morgan, no, Kelvin Mackenzie, ex-editor, no, the editor of The Telegraph, no. So it's frustrating. It's really hard, because actually I like to debate these things with them.
Exasperated, Grant picks up the phone himself and calls the editor of the Daily Mail, and then Conservative Central Office.
Is this Paul Dacre's office? Oh, hi, it's Hugh Grant here. I'm calling to see if there's any chance of perhaps getting an interview with Mr. Dacre. And we haven't had any luck so far. I just wondered if there's anyone you could recommend that I could, I don't know, beg. Cut off? It's a conspiracy. All these free speeches won't speak freely. Could you put me through to the press office, please? Pass me up the chain. We've been shooting it for weeks and had no luck. Hello. Anything you could do to help would be marvellous, because I do want the film to have both voices. It's ridiculous otherwise.
Unable to get interviews with his opponents, Grant plans to intercept one of them. He's heard that Boris Johnson is appearing on an ITV show, so Grant reluctantly agrees to appear as a guest himself in order to ambush Boris afterwards.
I get very tense.
What are you nervous about?
Well, I hate doing these things anyway, but I'm very nervous of confronting Boris Johnson. It just seems like suicide, because he's sort of untouchable. He's such a clever operator. His shtick is so good. Everything just bounces off. And I think I could have come out looking like a tit.
Doors closing.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the show, Tom Bradby!
Hugh, make your case. This is something you feel very passionately about.
Well, if you watched Leveson, you know, and it was pretty good television, and you saw this endless litany of horrors, it seems to me incredibly irresponsible and actually a bit creepy, a bit eerie, not to be prepared to go far enough to put all those terrible things right. If that requires a new independent regulator with statutory underpinning, that seems to me the responsible position. And I do think you have to ask, when you see people like Michael Gove trying to own the idea of freedom of speech as though no one else has ever thought of it, and Boris likes to go on about freedom of speech a lot in the Telegraph, there are cynics who say, well, there's a man who's paid $250,000 a year by the Daily Telegraph and who has a lot of chums and top brass at News International. And, you know, any ambitious politician like Boris, who wants to be leader of the party, maybe prime minister, has to do what every other...
OK, I think we need to hear Boris here at this point.
And get into bed...
Boris, come on, defend yourself.
Well, of course, Comrade Hugh is completely right. It is, I'm afraid that the awful truth is that politicians do have to have relationships with journalists, and they do have to get their message across about what they're trying to do. Obviously, we want the excesses of the press to be curbed, but one of the reasons, on the whole, we have a very a political system that is, by and large, free from corruption, is that we have exuberant, occasionally vicious media, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you turn flat rocks over, you will stop. You will.
How do you
will
get
expose this
sunlight
stuff.
if you're regulating yourself? If it's Dacre looking at himself, or,
Well, no,
Peter
Darren-
Hill
no, hang on.
reprimanding himself, where's the sunlight?
We can go on like this all night. Make it independent, but don't put it in the hands of politicians.
enough.
You're a man on a mission. You're a man on a mission.
Well, I am slightly, yeah.
I understand it. I understand it.
And it's because it's such a one-sided
But why
debate.
not? It's never- yeah,
and I
sure.
can't get anyone on the other side of the argument to talk to me. Everyone says no.
Oh, right. Which side of my space to be representing?
You know perfectly well which side you're representing.
I'm representing the freedom of the press. Is that what you want to say?
Which we're, of course, trying to muzzle.
It's very, very simple, folks. We've had a free press in this country for a very long time, and we haven't resorted to statutory regulation probably since the 18th century. In America, they really wouldn't contemplate something like this. People fought for this, for a free press. It's a very, very important part of our system.
Boris is an ambitious politician. Grant questions if what he says could be taken at face value and corners him again.
You can't accuse me of being a total patsy on this thing.
I could accuse you, perhaps, of being a pragmatist. It seems to me it's impossible to get ahead in politics without getting into bed with Murdoch and spooning him quite hard. And to some people, hugging him, embracing him. You must have spooned in your life. Thank you very much.
I thought spooning was
And to some people, that looks like what you've done.
That's a strong point. It's a strong point, but I reject it because I think it's part of my job to suck up ruthlessly to all sorts of media tycoons, no matter how bonkers or whatever they may be.
The Society of Editors has criticised Hacked Off as rich and powerful enemies of free speech.
They think they're plucky David taking on the Goliath of rich, powerful people who want to muzzle the press from investigating their affairs. But, of course, the truth is we're the David taking on a terrifying Goliath of huge newspaper groups who've enjoyed, massive alliance with government and a very strange relationship with the police for years. It's very clear to me who's David and who's Goliath.
After weeks of trying, Grant finally gets to meet an editor. The Times is one of the world's best-known newspapers. First published in 1788, it's now owned by Rupert Murdoch. Its editor, James Harding, has agreed to step into the ring.
What's Rupert Murdoch's position on a statutory backstop to a new regulator?
I don't know. You should ask him.
Oh, come on, James. He's obviously clearly against it. He's tweeted against it. He's crazily in favour of a totally a free-for-all for the press and self-regulation. We know that. Let's not disagree about that.
I genuinely don't know. I genuinely haven't sat there.
All right, then I'll ask you a different question. No one is trying to limit freedom of expression for individuals. I've met hundreds of journalists who are with us. They say, what have we got to fear from a little bit of statute? We're good journalists, we don't break the law, we don't take advantage of innocent people. We have nothing to fear from it. And that's really the question that keeps coming back to. What are you all so scared of? All that we're campaigning for is that newspapers obey the law and obey their own code of conduct. What's so scary about that?
What I don't understand is why you would want to sacrifice a principle. And I know that people say, oh, we don't want electoral free speech. Well, let's just stop for 1 second. Right? When FDR, when Roosevelt stood and said, what are the 4 great freedoms? The first one he referenced was freedom of speech.
Yeah.
When the US put it in their constitution, it was the First Amendment. Right?
Yep.
There is something really sacred here, and it's a line you're going to cross, and you're going to cross it for the best of intentions, but the consequence is going to be wrong. If you constrain the journalist's capacity to report, to investigate, to comment freely, the consequences will be worse
No one is.
for the people who
No
are
one's
most vulnerable.
suggesting
I
that.
genuinely believe
Who is
that.
suggesting constraining their ability
I think you
to do
are.
Why? Where?
I think you are.
What have I said that would constrain good public interest journalism? Who are the Free Speech Network who took out this one-page, very expensive ad in the Telegraph yesterday? Who are they?
My understanding is, firstly, can I just say they're quite good stories, don't you think?
I
It's the
agree.
hacking story, tax avoidance
Yes.
was a great story.
Yes.
Here's my question.
No one has ever argued. No one's ever argued.
Fantastic story.
I agree. Well done, the Daily Mail.
Expenses, that
Well
was
done.
a good story.
This here, they're very brave. They accused men who did do a murder of murder. They also accused the McCanns of murder, who didn't, and they also accused Christopher Jeffrey of murder, who didn't.
But
So
you-
let's
you
not
must
all
think
get
that's
too
a good
excited
thing.
about the Daily Mail. It's just
No,
fantastic.
but hold on. The Free Speech Network, as far as I understand it, is a group of different newspaper organisations. I know News International is one, Associated investigative newspapers, and I think there are a whole bunch of them, who are all coming out to try to say...
Big corporations defending their business model. That's how I see it.
I know that's how you see it, but that's...
Using emotive language like, if the press was shackled. Who have you heard in this debate in the last 18 months who has ever said, I'd like to shackle the free press?
I keep coming back to a simple thing, which is that I genuinely appreciate that you are trying to fix a problem, right? I don't think you and your colleagues have given enough consideration to the fact you're going to create a new one. And it's not worth the price.
The press argue that the idea of Parliament having any say in how they conduct their business threatens their vital role as watchdog on the state. Hacked Off argues that the kind of regulation they favour is already in use and working smoothly in other countries, like Finland and Denmark. Certainly, most of the victims of bad press want a better system than there is now. When Joe Yates was murdered in Bristol on Christmas Day 2010, Christopher Jeffries, her landlord, appeared in front of the press pack outside the house. And when police questioned him, the headlines implied that he was the murderer. But Jeffries was an innocent man.
Hi. Good to see you. Come in.
Thank you very much. The Mirror, Joe's suspect is Peeping Tom. The Sun, Joe's suspect, scared kids, obsessed by death. The Sun said, this is Joanna Yates's murder suspect, Chris Jeffries, sporting the wispy blue rinse hairdo that saw him branded strange by school pupils. Ex-teacher Jeffries bought the Bristol flat Joe rented from an old colleague who is in jail for child abuse. The police may now have to reopen the nearby unsolved 1974 killing of Gladys Carruthers. Do you think what they were doing was journalism in the public interest?
It was not journalism in the public interest at all. It was merely an attempt to provide a particular kind of sensational and salacious entertainment that would sell newspapers. And I'm sure this is part of the commercial model. And if people get hurt in the process, well, that is... to use another notorious euphemism, just so much collateral damage. The PCC didn't have any realistic sanctions which they could use against newspapers, but they're certainly not able to discipline newspapers and newspaper proprietors, nor were they able to fine newspapers significant sums, nor were they able to award compensation to victims. So it is extremely important that whatever regulator is established should be entirely independent of the press, entirely independent of government. Obviously, one of the things that was wrong with the PCC was that it was made up of editors who were overseeing other editors, kind of cosy club.
It's only 13 days to go to publication of Lord Leveson's report. In the increasingly bitter hostilities between Hacked Off and its opponents, Hugh Grant sees today's Daily Mail as a dramatic escalation. Splashed on the front page is an investigation into one of Lord Leveson's team.
Followed by 2, 3, 4, 5.
Inside, articles suggest there is a network of left-wing interests bent on curbing press freedom.
10, 11. 12 pages on one story, and I'm not convinced they did much more than that on 9/11, or for a general election result, or for even a royal wedding.
It was the Media Standards Trust, chaired by Bell, which set up Hacked Off, whose luminaries include those sexual incontinents, Max Mosley, Hugh Grant and Steve Coogan. There's nothing sexual about my incontinence, it's just something to do with age. We knew that there would be a lot of shouting via the megaphone of the press. I thought it was already turned up to 11 out of 10, but this turns it up to 30 out of 10. I mean, it's insane. And I almost think of it as good news, as I say, because it looks just deranged.
Pressure on number 10 is building every day. On one side, the press, led by the Daily Mail. On the other, the victims, and Hacked Off. Grant's worry is that the Prime Minister might take an alternative plan, drafted by Lord Hunt, former Thatcher Cabinet Minister and current chair of the PCC.
Hi. Good to see you. Yeah, well, it's very nice of you to do this, I must say.
Pleasure.
The basis of your new plan is contract law, is that right?
Yeah, if I can explain it this way, it's rather like buying a house. When you sign your contract, you might actually want to walk away after you've signed the contract. You might actually decide you want to buy another house somewhere. But my goodness, a judge can come along and say, you've signed that contract, you have to buy that house. And you can actually have an order compelling you to buy the house. If everyone could be persuaded to sign up, then, of course, it would work.
But Lord Hunt's plan relies on all the newspapers signing up to the contract.
I've been told that The Independent, The Express, the FT, the Mirror have not signed up to your plan.
Well, I don't know who your sources are, but I've seen what I call the publishers, the people at the very top.
Yes, those are my sources.
Oh, well, they're telling you one thing and telling me another.
Or are you telling the public one thing and...
No. Don't forget, I'm an independent person. All I just ask is you look at what I suggested to Lord Justice Leveson.
Yeah, well, we have, very carefully.
And
26 leading academics recently wrote to the Financial Times rejecting the plan. They called the scheme an attempt to perpetuate self-regulation by editors.
Can I just pause for a moment and say, why is everyone wanting so much to have a fight about all this?
It's not a fight, it's an opinion. You've drawn up a plan, and these are the opinions of 26 leading academics. This is the opinion of the Media Standards Trust, and the opinion of the core participant victims at Leveson. In the final part of Leveson, they gave an official submission saying that your plan, to them, is an insufficiently clean break with the current PCC and the failings associated with that organisation. So it hasn't had a great reception, your plan.
Well, let's await Lord Justice Leveson. I'm hoping Lord Justice Leveson will respond to some of the ideas we have put forward, that there should be a simple, easy way for people to have access to justice.
Yes, we're on the same page.
Yeah,
about
and
that.
I think we're on the same page on almost everything except what is called dab of statute. Can I just ask you, what do you mean by dab of statute?
What we mean is that, what I mean is that it's unrealistic to think that anyone will sign up to a plan where there's no underpinning of statute. There will be plenty of newspapers who will say, either at the signing up point or at the point where they get fined, who are you? Or give the finger.
So far you've said the only dab of statute you can so far justify is to persuade everyone to sign up.
Yes, well, it's
But if everyone's going to sign up, why do we need a statute? And I keep asking you, what else do you want in this statute?
Well, I'm afraid, with our limited time, I'm asking the questions. Let me ask you this. You talk in your speech, the Society of Editors, about, you say there are some people who may not share our belief in the precious nature of freedom of expression. You see, I haven't met any of those people. 18 months I've been investigating, involved in this whole issue. I've not met a single person in this country who has any desire to stifle freedom of expression. So who are you referring to here in your speech?
Well,
or are you just trying to spook people?
No, I'm not trying to spook people. I've been in Parliament for 36 years. A lot of members of Parliament still say to me, why haven't you had arrested the people on the Telegraph who accepted stolen property, namely the tape revealing their expenses? I just happen to believe that we benefit enormously from a free press. And let's wait for Lord Justice Leveson, and then let's talk again.
A week before Leveson publishes, and hacked off are raising the political stakes. They've invited victims of press abuse to London to meet the three party leaders. Kate McCann, whose daughter was abducted, Christopher Jeffries, Margaret Aspinall from the Hillsborough Family Support Group, John Tullach, 7/7 victim, and Paul Dadge, 7/7 hero, whose phones were hacked, the parents of Abigail Witchells, and Bob Dowler, father of Millie.
You have sat down opposite the politicians, in particular Mr. Cameron. Do you trust him? Do you trust them to deliver on what you want? It does suggest that you did get a sense that there were some differings of opinion between the three party leaders.
It took us 23 and a half years to get to the truth of Hillsborough. We've got the truth, but I've always felt we got the injustice because of press coverage that we had. I also think it's important as well for the future of this country that we do things about the press and make sure there's no intrusion on private lives, especially when it comes to people who've lost.
Just down the road today, a very different message was heard.
And MPs, members of Parliament and ministers and all the rest of it, don't you for one moment think of regulating a press that has been free in this city for more than 300 years.
Leading the applause for Boris Johnson, fellow ex-newspaper man Michael Gove, one of the Prime Minister's closest cabinet allies.
It's the 11th hour, and some newspapers are reporting that the Prime Minister may be planning to give the press another chance to regulate themselves.
Fear is, I suppose, what we always feared, that in the end, history will repeat itself. And just like every other Prime Minister in this situation before, this one will bottle it at the last moment and choose political expediency and votes and pleasing the press over principle.
And how does that make you feel at this stage?
Weary, cynical.
The phony war is over. The inquiry's report is tonight in the hands of the Prime Minister. Lord Leveson's verdict on the future of the British press will be published tomorrow.
Eight o'clock tomorrow night, buy a hat and make sure it's vintage. Kirsty Alsop is literally making somebody's big day. Kirsty's vintage wedding. Well, next tonight, when big might be just too big. Grand Designs.